stemming from special counsel Robert Mueller's Russia investigation. But as far as we know, this trial has nothing to do with any alleged Trump campaign collusion with Russia. That said, the stakes are still sky high on both sides. A conviction against the former Trump campaign chairman may be a big boost for the special counsel's probe, but an acquittal could undermine it and fuel claims that it's nothing more than a partisan witch hunt. Where have I heard that? This is Outnumbered, and I'm Melissa Francis. Here today is Harris Faulkner, Town Hall editor and Fox News contributor Katie Pavlich, Democratic strategist and Fox News contributor Jessica Charlov, and joining us on the couch today, conservative commentator and editor-in-chief of campusreform.org, Lawrence Jones, and he is outnumbered. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, ladies, for having me today.
You know I'm going to say it.
Oh, go ahead.
My friend from Texas. What's up, Big Law?
What's happening?
Short for Lawrence.
Okay.
Good to see you.
I'm glad you explained that. I wasn't sure. The biggest test yet for special counsel Robert Mueller as we enter day one of the Paul Manafort trial. President Trump's former campaign chairman facing a 32-count indictment, including charges of bank and tax fraud. And legal experts say the threat of a conviction could convince Manafort to cooperate with the special counsel's Russia probe. It is important to note that federal prosecutors have said their focus in this trial has nothing to do with whether or not the Trump campaign colluded with Russia. Senior counsel to the president, Kellyanne Conway, weighing in on that point earlier today.
The judge has very strictly instructed no mention of Paul Manafort's role in the Trump campaign. Don't mention Trump, don't mention Russia, don't mention collusion. This trial obviously centers on matters that have nothing to do with the campaign. I was the campaign manager for the winning part of the campaign. I assure you I will not be brought up on federal criminal charges of any type, and I certainly wasn't making money in Ukraine or talking to anyone in Moscow.
Peter Ducey is live outside the courthouse in Alexandria, Virginia with the latest. Peter.
Up on the 9th floor of this courthouse right now, Paul Manafort is sitting at a table with his legal team, just kind of taking it all in as a pool of about 75 potential jurors are selected for a trial expected to last at least 3 weeks. I was upstairs and noticed Manafort is wearing a suit instead of a prison jumpsuit like the last time he was here, but his ride to court from jail today was in the back of a nondescript gray van. He has remained in custody ever since a judge in Washington, D.C., where he also faces charges, accused him of trying to tamper with a witness. The judge in this case, T.S. Ellis, did once, back in May, accuse the special counsel of reaching with these charges and using financial allegations to pressure Manafort into spilling secrets that could hurt the president. Ellis seemed at the time to be challenging the scope of the special counsel's mission, since these charges have nothing to do with alleged election interference, but he allowed the trial to go on anyway. So fast forward to today. Jurors just heard that all of the 18 charges against Manafort are financial, including allegations of filing false tax returns, bank fraud, and conspiracy to commit bank fraud. The special counsel alleges that Manafort never told the IRS about $60 million he was paid by political figures in Ukraine, some of whom were backed by Russia, for lobbying work and consulting that he did long before he was ever associated with the Trump campaign. Manafort was initially brought on board with the Trump team because he had experience with a contested convention, and there was a possibility of that happening in Cleveland in 2016. It never did, but he later served as the campaign chairman for 3 months. And the president has said recently that he feels badly for Manafort because he really only was there for a couple of months, but wound up having years upon years of his financial records for unrelated work that he did, unrelated transactions, poured over by the special counsel, which of course brought us to today. Back to you.
All right, Peter, thank you so much for that. I'm going to bring it on out to the couch. Lawrence, $60 million.
Yeah.
That's a lot of dough.
Well, there's no doubt that Paul Manafort is shady. A lot of us have known that. If you've been involved in politics, you've heard him around Washington. But two things can be right at once. You can believe that Manafort is shady, and you can also believe, like Judge Ellis, that the prosecution, that the special counsel is trying to put pressure on Manafort to get some type of evidence against the president. And that's the part that concerns me. I don't think that's the way our judicial system, our criminal justice system should operate. If he wasn't the president's campaign manager, in likelihood, he wouldn't be facing these charges.
Well, but if he didn't break the law, he wouldn't appear to be breaking the law. I mean, that came first, right, Jessica, potentially?
Well, Potentially, for sure. And Lawrence is absolutely correct. And it goes beyond even if you're in the Washington scene that you know that Paul Manafort has had unsavory dealings for many decades. Certainly flies in the face of the president's claim that he only hires the best people, even for a few days or, you know, a couple months here in this case.
How would you know that if it beyond Washington?
You can Google it. I mean, Paul Manafort, if you're doing any normal background check and you Google Paul Manafort, a lot of things come up about his dealings in that part of the world. This was something, I would say, the most obvious mistake, the hiring mistake
But
that
to be
they
fair,
made.
he was brought on because they thought it was going to be a broken convention at the time.
Was it worth it?
And it wasn't worth it.
Yes.
I'm not saying it's right, but that's the
He has
reason
a lot
why.
of specialties.
Yeah.
One broken conventions, the
But
other.
I think the point
This
that,
kind of
that I hear
Lawrence
you
makes
making
this-
and I've heard others make, and it's an interesting point, is that, you know, in the throes of a campaign, is this what happens when everybody doesn't get that vetting? And, you know, it's tough because you had someone who is non-traditionally politician, right? And that's what people love about Donald Trump and loved about him as the candidate. So I don't think we should be too shocked with regard to the vetting that didn't happen. And a lot of what's out there about Paul Manafort was not clandestine, you know, but it is part of that process.
It didn't take much vetting to know that Paul Manafort was
Well, but
shady.
then you'd have to vet and know that you know there would be adjudication. You'd have it was more than just that. It was
Katie?
The bottom line is that what's happening to Paul Manafort has nothing to do with the 2016 presidential election at all, aside from the fact that he was the chairman of the Trump campaign. But what he is being charged with, what jurors are hearing about, has nothing to do with Russian collusion, has everything to do with Paul Manafort's business dealings. And let's not forget that this has been going back decades. This is not something that is new. The feds have been looking at Paul Manafort for a long time. He would have been facing the music at some point. It just so happens that the special counsel got their hands on a lot of the information, charged him with a series of felonies, and put the nails in the coffin for him. But he would have been facing these charges eventually based on the fact that they've been looking at him going back to 2006, at least. So,
But who had the president's back? That's my question. I mean, you see this constellation of players around, and Jessica's talking about it now, people whom he's hired, and you kind of go, well, why did you hire that person? Why did you hire this person?
well, doesn't Trump hire isn't he in charge
But
of
he
hiring
has
people?
a team to look out for him. He's in the throes of a campaign. Now he's a president. I mean, he's got a team to look out for him. And I just asked that question as we see the situation with Michael Cohen, too. I mean, come on.
But that was-
Shady dude taping his
But now-
people. I mean, come on.
But Michael
So the
Cohen has
question
been
is,
with
who's looking
him
out
for
him?
decades.
Let me be the devil's advocate here, though, because this is, you know, I mean, so you're looking at now two shady people that were around
the list is
president at the
longer.
time,
Yeah.
at least, but that's two that we're talking about here. And it is logical to question that if this is somebody who took money from Russia in the past and tried to hide where that money comes from, it's an entree into a campaign for the Russians. That's the connection that they're trying to make. That is, you know,
Whether
that
it
it's-
was intentional
you have
or-
to pursue.
Well, it's
Right,
a
and Paul Manafort-
cost-benefit analysis. So they probably knew about
That's vet and then what you're
Right,
talking
They probably
about.
knew about Paul Manafort, but they believed that the convention was so important, which it was, that they needed to bring that guy in at the last minute to make sure that they got the votes. And so now they're paying the price for that in some way politically and on the PR level. But in terms of the legal implications for this, there's nothing. They actually have nothing to do with anyone
Lawrence,
in
do
the
you think he
administration.
could have won without Manafort?
Oh, most definitely. He was going to win without it. But during that time...
'Cause this was convention win that I'm talking
Everyone was
about.
speculating about a broken convention, and that's why they used him. But again, I want to bring it back to the fact of them potentially using this to go after the president. That's what I don't like. I'm not saying this guy isn't shady. I'm not saying the law
That's how our
shouldn't go
system
after
works,
him.
though.
But that is wrong.
But
Our
Lawrence,
justice
just-
system wasn't designed where you leverage to go after when you have no evidence of collusion with the president. You then try to put pressure on this guy for a crime that's totally different.
But the crime hasn't been named for the president. And my question on that is, yes, that's the way the system works. But in order for
it shouldn't.
in order for Paul Manafort to be used against the president, there would have to be a there. And at this point, we haven't seen any evidence that there is any crime for any member of the Trump administration
Jessica
or
respond.
campaign in terms of collusion with the Russians.
But we also don't know what's going on here. And I know that there are a lot of people who say we want this to speed up. We want to know what Bob Mueller has, and we want this to come to a conclusion because it's ripping apart the country, though every other investigation beforehand apparently wasn't destroying the country. We don't know what there is there. Paul Manafort's lawyer was clear today that he would not be cooperating. We will see how the next few weeks go. Things can change, especially when when you're facing charges of this level. I don't think Michael Cohen came into any of this with SDNY saying that he might be someone who flips, and now with each day and every new tape that Lanny Davis
but he knew
leaks,
he had recordings if he wanted to.
Right. So I don't think that we can say that definitively. The president is on Twitter today playing word games about what collusion is and conspiracy, and it was really
but we
the
can
Democrats.
say definitively what has been named now and what the special counsel has charged people with. And so at the moment, we have no charges for any Trump administration officials that have to do with collusion with the Russians.
But
so,
you do have financial crimes. We also don't
which
have
are
all,
irrelevant.
but we also don't have all
but
the
there's
information.
more trial time coming up. I mean, this is the first that we have seen, and
Right.
this has to do with, whatever the taxes, didn't pay taxes, I mean, so on and so forth. So this wasn't initially supposed to be about any of that Russian collusion investigation anyway, but there's more to come.
But we got Rick Gates out of this as well, who worked with Paul Manafort, who now, according to Michael Cohen, was present when Don Jr.
And
was
when
talking
he
about
takes
the
the
meeting.
stand, that's the next.
Right. Rick
that's the
Gates is
next
going to be key in
point.
here, and he worked with Paul Manafort for a very long time. So there's a lot more that we
business
don't.
stuff.
That may be fine, but I don't know if he just worked with him on business stuff, and he was in the room when Don Jr. was saying, "I've gotten an email from a Kremlin lawyer. We should have her over."
It's just too much speculation.
I mean,
I think the American people are tired of it.
President Trump is warning lawmakers again that he is willing to shut down the government if lawmakers won't step up with funding for the wall and border security. So will a shutdown happen, and how will the fight affect the midterms? Plus, controversy across the country as some mayors are siding with Abolish ICE protesters over law enforcement. Whether that is a good move or if they will face backlash, we debate.